Namaskar, good afternoon. Welcome to the RCI studio of the Navshikhar channel. आज हमारा teleconferences का जो series है वो जारी है and today we are discussing the topic of planning and management of special education, especially in the context of education of children with visual impairment. In our studio we have with us two very senior and eminent experts, and I would like to introduce them to you before we commence the program. I'll start with Professor Mittal, who is sitting on my immediate left. Professor Mittal is a professor at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Education of the Faculty of Education of Jamia Millia Islamia, and has been associated with the university for over 16 years, where he had joined earlier as a reader. He teaches the B.Ed and the M.Ed level students in special education, and is also a guide for PhD and research students. More than 10 odd students have already done the PhD under him,
Yes.
and I think 9 more are pursuing currently. Professor Mittal is also involved in the administrative work of the department. Apart from that, he is the country representative of the West Asia Region Committee of the ICEVI, which many of you may have heard of. It is actually the full form is the International Council of Education of People with Visual Impairment. Professor Mittal is also closely associated with the Rehabilitation Council of India since, in fact, its inception as a statutory body. He's also a member of our expert committees on visual impairment, as well as the Committee on Assessment and Accreditation. He's also an approved PhD guide at 3 other universities, including the a more recent deemed university, which is the Ramakrishna Vivekanand Education Research and Research Institute. He's written many books. One of the more popular books which some of you may have read is The Personality Traits of the Blind. He's also written a book for RCI on career prospects in the field of rehabilitation, which I'm sure many of you will find very useful, considering that you are all studying to become rehabilitation professionals. Professor Mittal is also the first chairman of the newly constituted Braille Council of India. On my extreme left is Dr. R.B.L. Soni, who is with the NCERT in New Delhi, looking after the area of elementary education at this point of time, but is an expert in the field of special education. He did his early education in special schools, but later completed it from what were regular schools and what we now would term as an inclusive school. Dr. Soni is a graduate and a postgraduate from St. Stephen's College and Delhi University, having done his honors and masters in philosophy. He's also completed his MPhil and went on to do a course in teacher training in special education from the Perkins School for the Blind, and which has a collaborative program with the Boston College. He taught for 3 years in a special school setting at the Blind Relief Association in Delhi, and joined NCERT in 1986 as a lecturer in special education. And from the year 2000, he's been a reader in the Department of Elementary Education. Dr. Soni has also done his Masters in Education from Manchester University in the UK, and has written 3 books on integrated education, autotelic learning, and also a book on Gandhi on Satyagraha and basic education, and has published numerous articles which have been published in various magazines and journals and papers. So I would like to now pass the baton on to Dr. Soni, if he would like to make his presentation, and then Professor Mittal, if that's okay, we will discuss the topic as we go along.
Yeah.
So Dr. Soni, all yours.
Yeah, audience, most welcome. And in case you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask in between, because that will facilitate our explanation and also the understanding of the topic. First, I would like to talk about education and special education, because special education is integral part of education. When we talk of education, it may be defined as preparation for life, or it's a kind of all-round development, as Gandhi said, all-round development of body, mind and soul. In that context, special education has some more components, but it does include the part of these developments and preparation for life. Of course, we will have all the discussions because we are mainly concerned with planning and management of special education. But I felt that planning and management is not only an administrative aspect, but it is also inclusive of educational aspects, whereby teaching, planning interactions, changing attitudes, planning change of attitudes and so on. So many things are involved in it. Therefore, I have not only taken administrative aspect, but also the other aspects which are essential for special education. Now I move on to next slide. In this slide, a model has been shown where the education is the larger thing under which comes special education, and the special education has been divided broadly in two parts. One part is special school setting and the other part is inclusive education setting. For the visually impaired teachers who may be having training, I would like to explain it little bit differently. There is a big box that is education, and under that box there is another box which is special education. Within a special education box, there are two boxes. One is special education and the other is inclusive education. अगर आप हो सकता है कुछ लोगों को इंग्लिश में दिक्कत भी हो, तो मैं हिंदी में भी बताना चाहूँगा कि एक बड़ा सा बॉक्स बना हुआ है, उस बॉक्स में लिखा है एजुकेशन. उस बॉक्स के अंदर एक और बॉक्स बना हुआ है जिसमें लिखा है स्पेशल एजुकेशन. ये जो दूसरा बॉक्स है स्पेशल एजुकेशन का, इसके अंदर दो बॉक्सेस बनाए गए हैं. एक है स्पेशल स्कूल सेटिंग और दूसरा बॉक्स है इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन सेटिंग. पर्पस ये, अगर हम इमेजिन करें कि अगर एक हॉल है, हॉल के अंदर मान लीजिए क्यूबिकल है और उस क्यूबिकल के अंदर टेबल चेयर्स आदि सामान है, तो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एजुकेशन को हॉल मानते हुए, क्यूबिकल को स्पेशल एजुकेशन मानते हुए, और उसके अंदर जो दो चीज है वो है स्पेशल एजुकेशन एंड इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन. तो ये पर्पस सिर्फ इसका ये था कि विजुअली इसको कैसे प्रेजेंट किया जा सके ताकि इसके जो आपस में रिलेशनशिप है एजुकेशन और स्पेशल एजुकेशन की, और स्पेशल एजुकेशन के अंदर जो दो कंपोनेंट्स हैं उनको हम किस तरह से शो करेंगे. बाकी डिटेल जो है अगले स्लाइड्स में आ रहा है. नेक्स्ट स्लाइड. Definition of special education. We have been talking about education and special education. Now we have to focus now on special education. What is special education? There may be number of definitions given by different authors. But for the sake of discussion here, making it easy to understand, the special education refers to the education of groups with special needs. With special needs has to be underlined, because nowadays special education does not only deal with children with disabilities, but with other groups as well. That's why broadly I have defined it, special education, as a education of groups with special needs. Of course, it includes handicapped children, which is our present concern. And more specifically, we are talking about children with visual impairments. स्पेशल एजुकेशन को मैंने डिफाइन किया है यहाँ पर कि उन ग्रुप्स के लिए है जिनकी कुछ विशेष आवश्यकताएं हैं. विशेष आवश्यकताएं कई ग्रुप्स की हो सकती हैं, लेकिन हमारा कंसर्न प्रेजेंटली वो विजुअली हैंडीकैप्ड चिल्ड्रन से है, इसलिए हमारा जो पूरा डिस्कशन का फोकस है वो विजुअली हैंडीकैप्ड चिल्ड्रन ही हैं. अब हम नेक्स्ट स्लाइड पर मूव करते हैं. ये है, यहाँ पर हमने विजुअल इम्पेयरमेंट को डिफाइन किया है. डेफिनेशन ऑफ विजुअल इम्पेयरमेंट्स. अगेन the definitions have been given in various books, but for our purpose I have modified it slightly, not totally. So I have defined visual impairments refer to the conditions where the visual acuity, that is distance vision, of a person reduces to 20 by 200 feet or 6 by 60 meters or less, and or the field of vision, that is peripheral vision, subtracts to 20-degree angle or less after all possible corrections, affecting his or her visual functioning. In short, the definition says that when a person's visual acuity, which is distance vision or field of vision, reduces to the extent that the person is not able to carry out the functions which a normally person does, in that case that person is legally blind or legally visually impaired. The classification of visual impairment would be discussed in the coming slides, but for your purpose, besides technical definitions, you have to see that the person's vision has reduced to the extent that he cannot carry out the normal functions. Therefore, he has to be given training, or he has to be provided appliances to be able to work normally. One more thing I would like to explain here is what is meant by 20 by 200 feet. It simply means that a normal person can see from the distance of 200 feet, which is approximately equivalent to 60 meters. But the person's vision reduces to the extent that he is able to see the same thing from the distance of 6 meters or 20 feet or less than that. That is meant by 220 feet or 6 by 60 meters. Similarly, while looking at the angle at which a normal person can see, if this the normal person can see at the angle of 180 degree, but when the vision reduces to the extent that the person is able to see at 20-degree angle only, then that condition also comes under the visual impairment. Either of these conditions, that is distance vision or peripheral vision, or both, can happen in the case of visual impairments. Now I go on to the next slide. Planning, because our major topic, today's topic was planning and management of special education. I felt that before proceeding on to its practical aspect, we need to define it. Therefore, the planning has been defined as outlining the goals to be achieved. That means the goals that we have to plan them. We have to outline them. We have to classify them into various categories, and planning the resources to achieve the goals. It's not only planning and setting the goals, but also categorizing them, which will be discussed in the coming slides. But actually, we meant by planning that we have to plan, we have to set our objectives, we have to categorize them, what kind of objectives are they, what are the different aspects that would be covered, which will include various types of planning like administrative planning, educational planning, building planning, equipment planning, teacher training planning. All these things will be discussed in the coming slides. Now the planning could be long term and the planning could be short term. Depends on what kind of objectives we have. For instance, if we want to start special education in future, we have long term planning, because then we have to plan building, the site for the building, then appropriate plan for the building, then finances, then a special staff for that program, then equipment, resources, types of training, and so many things have to be included. But in short-term planning, we have immediate objective, what we want to achieve now. For instance, we want to start inclusive education in a particular school, and in that context, we have immediate planning that we have to have a special teacher, we have to have special equipments, we have to have braille books, we have to have large print books, and so on. So for short-term planning, we have different objectives, and for long-term planning, we have different objectives. The long-term planning has different classifications, whereas the short-term planning generally have the immediate objective to be achieved. Now I move to the next slide, and this deals with management. Just as I have defined planning above, now I would define management. Management could be defined as implementation of planning to achieve the goals. During the planning, we have set certain goals or certain objectives. Now we would like to achieve them. In order to achieve them, we have certain implementation strategies that will help us to achieve our goal. Therefore, management plays an important part after planning. But planning in itself is nothing. It has to be implemented. Then and only then we can achieve the goals. In order to implement the planning, we have kind of management. The management includes implementation of policies and programs and administrative aspects. If you remember, we had National Policy on Education, 1986. In that policy, there was a chapter for special education, and in that chapter they said there would be special schools as well as what they called integrated education setting, and depending on the nature and needs of the disabilities, they would be attending these two types of settings. And of course, classification of handicaps were done, and for instance, mild and moderate disabled children would attend integrated education setting, and severe and profound disabled children would go to special schools. This was the kind of mandate over there.
Part of the policy.
It was policy, but later on, after careful examination, it was felt that we cannot generalize this category of mild, moderate, severe, and profound, because that depends what kind of disability is that. For instance, a person with total loss of vision may be considered profoundly disabled. I mean, if we go to that definition, we'll find that the person who cannot see at all, he is profoundly handicapped. But in practice, that is not the case, because he can do so many things. It's not profound disability which will hamper him from doing the essential things. On the contrary, the person whose mental retardation level is at profound level, he cannot do anything. Therefore, this categorization cannot be applied on all categories of disabled. So, keeping this in view, this policy was implemented with slight modifications. Similarly, there was another program, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. You must have heard of it. It's going on.
Yes.
And education of handicapped children is a part of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. So, planning and implementation, or planning or management of special education has serious implications. I mean, or in other words, if I say it otherwise, policies and programs have serious implications for special education. Until 1986, when this new national policy on education was brought in, the integrated education was going on, but there was no proper policy. I mean, there was no kind of administrative instructions. Of course, in 1974, Government of India, Department of Social Welfare brought out an order saying that the children who attend normal schools for integrated education would get certain benefits. But it was more concerned with benefits. It was not actually concerned with how the education has to be transacted, what are the facilities to be given. I mean, it was kind of more kind of sympathy. No. It was not a right. But after national policy, there was a movement towards right, and as a result of that, the Act of 1995, Disability Act, that was brought in, and here the court is in a position to issue instructions that what kind of facility have to be given to particular type of disabled children. So,
can I just,
sure.
Professor Mittal, would you like to comment on this discussion?
ऐसा है कि जो स्कीम की बात है 74 की, उसमें भी ऑब्जेक्टिव्स जो इंटीग्रेटेड एजुकेशन के होंगे, और जो फैसिलिटीज़ एक बच्चे को अगर रेगुलर स्कूल में वो पढ़ता है या कोई स्कूल अपने यहाँ इंटीग्रेटेड एजुकेशन इम्प्लीमेंट करना चाहता है, तो उसको क्या क्या फैसिलिटीज़ गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से, बिकॉज इट वाज अ सेंट्रली स्पॉन्सर्ड स्कीम. Since it was a centrally sponsored scheme, what benefits or what facilities, what support a school wishing to implement integrated education for children with disabilities, it needs, they are spelled out in that. Of course, in that scheme, certain problems were there. For example, it was mentioned in that scheme कि अगर किसी स्कूल में 8 या 10 बच्चे होंगे तो उनको एक स्पेशल टीचर, रिसोर्स टीचर की सैलरी गवर्नमेंट देगी। अब सवाल इस बात का है कि क्या जरूरी है कि एक स्कूल में 8-10 बच्चे हों एक ही डिसेबिलिटी के? भाई एक स्कूल जो है वो केटर करता है मैक्सिमम 2 to 3 किलोमीटर रेडियस को ज्योग्राफिकली मैक्सिमम, और जरूरी नहीं है कि उस 2-3 किलोमीटर के रेडियस में 8 बच्चे ब्लाइंड हों या 10 बच्चे डेफ हों या 8-10 बच्चे लोकोमोटर हैंडीकैप के हों। और अगर नहीं है तो इसका मतलब टीचर की सैलरी नहीं मिलेगी, और जब टीचर की सैलरी नहीं मिलेगी तो पढ़ाई बच्चे की होगी नहीं, केवल वो स्कूल में एडमिट हो जाएगा, दैट्स ऑल। इस तरह की कुछ दिक्कतें थी जो कि बाद में, चूंकि ये स्कीम सोशल जस्टिस, उस वक्त जिसको सोशल वेलफेयर कहते थे हम, जिसका कि बाद में नाम फिर वेलफेयर मिनिस्ट्री हुआ, फिर बाद में 96 में सोशल जस्टिस एंड एम्पावरमेंट हुआ, मैंने कहा गांधी जी के टाइम से। तो इस चीज को दूर करने के लिए इसमें मॉडिफिकेशंस किए गए, और इससे पहले कि मॉडिफिकेशंस होते, चूंकि ये स्कीम एजुकेशन के लिए थी, इसलिए इस स्कीम को सोशल वेलफेयर से ट्रांसफर कर दिया एजुकेशन मिनिस्ट्री के पास, एंड देन दीज मॉडिफिकेशंस वर ब्रॉट इन। उसमें फिर ये किया गया कि अगर 8-10 बच्चे सारी डिसेबिलिटीज की मिलाकर भी अगर हैं तो उनको एक रिसोर्स टीचर की सैलरी मिल सकती है। फॉर एग्जांपल 2 ब्लाइंड, 3 डेफ और 3 लोकोमोटर हैंडीकैप्ड, 8 बच्चे हो गए, 2 + 3 + 3, तो भी उनको एक रिसोर्स टीचर की सैलरी मिल जाएगी। नॉट नेसेसरी दैट द स्कूल शुड हैव ओनली 8 चिल्ड्रन विथ विजुअल इम्पेयरमेंट। तो इस तरह की चीजें उस स्कीम में भी थी। जो प्रॉब्लम थी बेसिकली वो नॉर्म्स की थी, और उन नॉर्म्स को रिवाइज किया गया बाद में। ऑब्जेक्टिव और एरिया ऑफ सपोर्ट, काइंड ऑफ सपोर्ट, इसमें कोई रिवीजन नहीं हुआ, नॉर्म्स में रिवीजन हुआ। ये एक खास बात थी उसकी।
Can we go, Dr. Soni, would you like to continue?
I would like to add one more thing
जी
कि ये जब से डिसेबिलिटी एक्ट आया, इससे पहले ये एक तरह से वेलफेयर की एक्टिविटी ज़्यादा मानी जा रही थी। मतलब ये एजुकेशन को भी, जब तक ये उस डिपार्टमेंट में थी सोशल वेलफेयर में, इसको एक तरह से वेलफेयर एक्टिविटी की तरह से ट्रीट किया जा रहा था। लेकिन जब एजुकेशन में आई तो इसको एक तरह से बच्चे का राइट, जो फंडामेंटल राइट की तरह लिया गया है।
शिफ्ट फ्रॉम चैरिटी टू राइट्स मोड आ गई हमारी।
राइट
जी।
Now go to the next slide. Role of planning and management. Planning and management play a crucial role in special education. Success or failure of special education depends on planning and management of special education. आप देखेंगे कि हमने प्लानिंग की है, वो क्या हमारी प्लानिंग आज की कंडीशंस में रिलेवेंट है, ये एक इश्यू उठता है। अगर हम ऊपर लेवल पर बैठ करके अगर ये तय करें कि ओनली स्पेशल स्कूल्स चलेंगे, या हम ये तय करें कि ओनली इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन सेटिंग ही चलेगी, ये हमारे लिए एक तरह से गलत डिसीजन होगा। तो जो प्लानिंग और मैनेजमेंट है उसको ये देखना पड़ेगा नीड्स क्या है, कंट्री की नीड्स क्या है, बच्चों की नीड्स क्या है, क्योंकि बच्चे अलग अलग तरह के हो सकते हैं। सम चिल्ड्रन आर ब्राइट, सम आर एवरेज, सम आर स्लो लर्नर्स, और इनके लिए अगर हम कहें एक ही तरह की सेटिंग अप्रोप्रिएट है या एक ही तरह का टीचिंग मेथड अप्रोप्रिएट है, ये गलत होगा। इसलिए प्लानिंग और मैनेजमेंट स्पेशल एजुकेशन में नीड बेस्ड होना चाहिए। द प्लानिंग एंड management has to be need based. Of course, if planning is there, then the management has to be according to the planning itself. I mean, what kind of planning we have, then we have to see what kind of strategies are adopted for implementation of that planning. तो स्पेशल एजुकेशन की जो प्लानिंग है उसमें बहुत केयरफुल रहना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि हवा के साथ नहीं बहना है। जनरली हवा के साथ हम लोग बहुत बहते हैं कि कल को जब इंटीग्रेटेड एजुकेशन फॉरेन कंट्रीज में शुरू हुई तो यहाँ भी हो गई, इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन वहाँ कहा, यहाँ भी इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन हो गया, है बहुत अच्छा। लेकिन हमारी सर्कमस्टांसेस के हिसाब से, या व्हाट इज मोस्ट अप्रोप्रिएट फॉर चाइल्ड, it is not we who will decide what kind of programs and plannings we would like to implement. It's the children, what kind of programs they need. What is our ultimate objective? Our ultimate objective is to make them independent, to make them social, to make them a kind of part of society.
Dr. Soni, in that context, then, would you what is your opinion? Should we have special education, or should we really provide special services in an inclusive education setting? आप जो कह रहे हैं that we need to look at address the needs of the child or needs of the children really. So आपका क्या राय है इसमें?
एक्चुअली हमें दोनों की ही जरूरत है।
अच्छा,
हम लोग ये नहीं कह सकते कि इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन सेटिंग ही केवल चाहिए या स्पेशल एजुकेशन सेटिंग चाहिए।
they should not be exclusive of each other. We need to
दोनों ही चाहिए। कुछ बच्चे ऐसे हैं जो इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन सेटिंग में बहुत अच्छा करेंगे, just like other children. If you provide them necessary facilities, and even if you don't provide necessary facilities, they will do well. लेकिन कुछ बच्चे ऐसे होंगे जिनको दिक्कत है, वो कोप अप नहीं कर पा रहे हैं इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन सेटिंग में। उस कंडीशन में हमें उनको स्पेशल एजुकेशन सेटिंग देनी पड़ेगी। तो एक्चुअली ये दोनों ही सेटिंग्स कॉम्पिटिटिव नहीं है, ये दोनों ही सेटिंग्स कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री हैं, एक दूसरे को सपोर्ट कर रही हैं। लेकिन किसका कितना इम्पोर्टेंस है वो डिपेंड करता है कि चाइल्ड की नीड्स क्या है। चाइल्ड फर्स्ट।
Can I intervene?
Yes, please.
ऐसा है कि I would like to go back to that point where Dr. Soni has defined special education. मेरे विचार में लोगों में बहुत बड़ी भ्रांति है, कंफ्यूजन है। डॉक्टर सोनी के माइंड में नहीं कह रहा हूँ, प्लीज सोनी साहब आप माइंड मत कीजिए, मैं आपके उसमें नहीं कह रहा हूँ, लेकिन जनरल कि स्पेशल एजुकेशन वही है जो स्पेशल स्कूल्स में दी जाती है, ऐसा नहीं है। स्पेशल एजुकेशन टर्म अपने आप में चूंकि यूज होने लगी, यूज हो रही है, हम लोग कर रहे हैं, बट वास्तव में ये टर्म अपने आप में इनअप्रोप्रिएट है, मिसनोमर है। अगर हम एटिमोलॉजिकली देखें तो स्पेशल एजुकेशन का मीनिंग होगा क्या? वो एजुकेशन जो स्पेशल हो। क्या ब्लाइंड बच्चे की एजुकेशन स्पेशल है? इट इज नॉट। ही ऑल्सो लर्न्स हिंदी द सेम टेक्स्ट बुक फ्रॉम द सेम टेक्स्ट बुक्स, from the same type of language, everything the same. इंग्लिश वो पढ़ता, वो भी वही पढ़ता, गणित वो पढ़ता, उसके लिए ब्याज निकालने का फार्मूला कोई अलग तो नहीं होता, isn't it? तो एजुकेशन स्पेशल नहीं है। एजुकेशन का जो ट्रांजैक्शन है वो स्पेशल है, वो अलग है, वो डिफरेंट है, उसके लिए मटेरियल अलग चाहिए। उसके लिए ब्लाइंड बच्चे के लिए हमको ब्रेल बुक की जरूरत पड़ सकती है, डेफ बच्चे के लिए साइन लैंग्वेज कम्युनिकेशन के लिए यूज किया जाता है। उस ब्लाइंड बच्चों के लिए टेक्टाइल मटेरियल चाहिएगा, सीइंग बच्चों के लिए विजुअल मटेरियल चाहिएगा हमको। तो स्पेशल एजुकेशन इज नॉट दैट विच इज गिवन इन स्पेशल स्कूल, इवन इन इंक्लूसिव सेटिंग वी नीड स्पेशल एजुकेशन। ब्रेल तो हमको इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन में बच्चों को पढ़ानी पड़ेगी। इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन में भी ब्लाइंड बच्चे को अबेकस का यूज सिखाना पड़ेगा, गणित अगर उसको सिखाना है तो टेलर फ्रेम भी हमको उसको वहां सिखाना पड़ेगा। तो स्पेशल एजुकेशन को स्पेशल स्कूल के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देखना बहुत मेरे विचार में गलत बात है। स्पेशल एजुकेशन इज नॉट स्पेशल स्कूल एजुकेशन। स्पेशल एजुकेशन मीन्स education of children with visual impairment or education of children with deafness with the help of specific material, specific adaptation that they need due to their sensorial limitations, sensorial problems. That is what I would like to say about special education.
डॉक्टर सोनी ने वो पहले कहा भी था कि स्पेशल एजुकेशन एंड जो आपने कहा ना इट्स पार्ट ऑफ the whole system of education itself.
And one more thing, I said special education is education of children
बिल्कुल
with
बिल्कुल
special
whether it is in
needs.
school, special school, residential school,
Yeah, it could be
exclusive
either
school,
setting.
or inclusive setting,
Yeah.
wherever it is.
With
It
special
is not
needs.
special
It's
school.
not only special. It's not special education.
नहीं, मैंने ये पॉइंट इसलिए रेज किया कि जब स्पेशल एजुकेशन इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन की कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री की बात जब करने लगते हैं तो ऐसा लगता है कि स्पेशल एजुकेशन
Settings की
स्पेशल
complementary.
है ना, जबकि स्पेशल स्कूल सेटिंग और इंक्लूसिव सेटिंग
Yeah, I have used that word.
वही ना, स्पेशल एजुकेशन सेटिंग नहीं है, स्पेशल स्कूल सेटिंग,
Yeah.
इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन
Right.
सेटिंग।
जी
तो इसलिए मैंने इस बात को, क्योंकि बहुत शॉर्ट पीरियड में तैयार किया, लेकिन फिर भी मैंने ये ध्यान रखा था, इसलिए मैंने सेटिंग, जो अगर आप मॉडल रिमेंबर करते हैं, जो मॉडल शो किया गया है उसमें यही वर्ड यूज किया गया है, स्पेशल स्कूल सेटिंग, इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन सेटिंग।
सेटिंग जी
और इसलिए स्पेशल एजुकेशन को मैंने डिफाइन करते समय किया कि इस एजुकेशन ऑफ ग्रुप्स विद स्पेशल नीड्स, जिनकी स्पेसिफिक नीड्स हैं। और ये काफ़ी ब्रॉड डेफिनेशन है जिस पर डिफरेंस ऑफ ओपिनियन भी होते ही हैं, और वो तो हर एरिया में, क्या एजुकेशन है, क्या इकोनॉमिक्स है, डिफरेंसेस ऑफ ओपिनियन तो है, पर पर्पस एक ही है कि ऐसे ग्रुप्स को जिनकी नीड्स है इस तरह की, उनको प्रॉपर एजुकेशन दी जा सके।
adapted and made appropriate
या
As per the needs of the
as per their
child.
specific needs. Yes.
बिल्कुल।
अब मैं नेक्स्ट स्लाइड पे जाता हूं। अभी हमने जो डिस्कस किया था वो था मैनेजमेंट, हमने शायद ये किया ना, रोल ऑफ
Role of planning,
Planning and
management.
management.
आपको next slide में जाना
अब नेक्स्ट स्लाइड में मैं जा रहा हूं।
है। जी
ये है स्लाइड, ग्रुप्स इन्वॉल्व इन प्लानिंग एंड मैनेजमेंट ऑफ स्पेशल एजुकेशन। स्पेशल एजुकेशन वर्ड हम यूज इसलिए कर रहे हैं कि यही पॉपुलर है, इसी के नाम से ज्यादातर डॉक्यूमेंट्स निकल रहे हैं, पर मीनिंग आप समझ चुके होंगे कि ये एक तरह से एजुकेशन है फॉर चिल्ड्रन विद स्पेशल नीड्स। तो यहाँ पर जो हम कहना चाहते हैं वो ये है कि कौन कौन से ग्रुप्स का प्लानिंग में और मैनेजमेंट में होना जरूरी है। जनरली क्या हो रहा है कि प्लानिंग जो हो रही है वो हाई लेवल पर हो रही है वो हो रही है एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स के लेवल पर, लेकिन ये पाया गया कि अगर प्लानिंग में उन सब ग्रुप्स को अगर हम इन्वॉल्व करें जो लोग डायरेक्टली या इनडायरेक्टली स्पेशल मतलब चिल्ड्रन विद स्पेशल नीड्स के साथ रिलेटेड हैं, तो इससे प्लानिंग और मैनेजमेंट दोनों ही मोर इफेक्टिव हो सकते हैं। तो ग्रुप्स जो हमको इंक्लूड करने हैं उनमें एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स, बी है टीचर्स, सी है पेरेंट्स एंड डी है द कम्युनिटी।
community. So all the stakeholders that are involved in the delivery of education and of the children with special needs.
Right.
Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah, because why? Administrators are very important for planning purpose, whether they are at central level or at state level or at school level.
District and
The role of administrator in planning and implementation of the planning is very important, no doubt.
जी
But if he does everything by himself or herself and doesn't take into consideration the other groups,
जी
then that planning has some kind of lacuna. Because for instance, when you're giving orders for teaching of children, maybe let's say the children who are of average ability or children who are below ability, then if you don't involve the teacher and simply order that okay, you have to use this kind of method for teaching these children, that may not be appropriate.
जी
Therefore, the involvement of teacher is very important as far as educational part is concerned. Similarly, parents, we cannot say parents don't know anything. Parents know so many things about their child. They know what kind of my child is, what is his or her likes and dislikes, to what extent he can perform certain things. तो इसलिए इसमें प्लानिंग और मैनेजमेंट दोनों में ही डिफरेंट ग्रुप्स का इन्वॉल्वमेंट जरूरी है। लास्ट है कम्युनिटी. कम्युनिटी, जिस कम्युनिटी के अंदर स्कूल है
जी.
उसका कल्चर क्या है, वो कम्युनिटी का कितना पार्टिसिपेशन है स्कूल एक्टिविटी में, उससे भी स्कूल की प्रोग्रेस डिटरमिन होती है. रिसर्च में पाया गया है कि जिन स्कूल्स में कम्युनिटी पार्टिसिपेशन अधिक है उन स्कूल्स की तरक्की भी बहुत है और उस स्कूल की एक्टिविटीज़ भी सुचारू रूप से चलती हैं. लेकिन जिन स्कूल्स में कम्युनिटी का कोई इन्वॉल्वमेंट नहीं है, वहाँ की टीचिंग हो या वहाँ का रिजल्ट हो, उसमें कमियां पाई गई हैं. ये कई जगह प्रैक्टिकली भी देखा गया है. इसलिए इन्वॉल्वमेंट ऑफ वेरियस ग्रुप्स is desirable in planning and administration of the policies.
Dr. Soni, can I ask you to elaborate a little bit on the role of, यहाँ जैसे आपने कहा teachers, तो here this would include say the regular teacher
Yeah.
and the special educator here,
Right.
and would there be a clear-cut definition of the role that each has to play? Would you like to comment on?
Actually, if it is inclusive education,
जी.
in that case, I would say the teacher directly related to children with the special needs, and that would be the special teacher as well as the regular teacher,
जी.
because they know where the child needs help, what kind of problems they encounter while teaching a visually impaired child. So the teachers, regular teachers as well as special teachers should be part of the planning in case of visually impaired child. But let's talk of the school as a whole. The school as a whole must be having some ideas, like what kind of teaching methods we would like to experiment this year, what kind of approach we would like to have to involve parents, what kind of approach we would like to have for involvement of community. And in this kind of planning, where all teachers and administrator will be included or be part of it, there I mean, you cannot ignore the parents. Parents should also participate. They can give suggestions. What kind of activities could be undertaken for my child? And when you invite other parents also, besides the parents of a handicapped child, they will also interact with each other, and that would give a kind of community support. Because what is community? Community are the people living in that particular community. So when the parents of other children come, when the members of the panchayat or member of that particular area comes to the school for planning purposes, then there is interaction in between these groups, and that gives a kind of not only awareness for handicapped children, but also it gives a kind of opportunity to sensitize themselves what are the needs,
About
what
the
else can
special
be done.
needs of the children.
Yeah.
Yes.
So involvement of all groups, all teachers, not only special teacher, but all teachers, where they discuss things with each other, what are the problems, how they can be overcome. So this gives a great opportunity for sensitizing each other about their problems. So here the role of various groups in planning and management can be ensured.
Well, as far as the
Yes.
difference, clear-cut role of regular teacher and a special educator is concerned,
जी.
I for one feel that a special educator is a teacher as well as a consultant. Consultant to a regular teacher, consultant to a parent, consultant to the administrator of the school, and consultant to the local self-government and other community agencies.
So in a sense, a somewhat larger role perhaps? would you
Larger
say?
role definitely so far as the education of children with blindness is concerned, education of children with disability is concerned.
Ji.
Because a regular teacher has no understanding as of now, by and large. Majority of the regular school teachers have no understanding of the needs of children with disabilities, particularly children with blindness. They only know what has to be taught,
The curriculum
teaching.
transaction.
They know how it has to be transacted, whether the blind child is getting or not, receiving something or not. They are in many cases, in many instances, unable to determine,
handle that.
handle. Therefore, their role is to tell, to inform, to provide information to a special educator. Look, this child comes to my class, he sits, he listens also, whatever he understands he answers also when I ask questions, but still he is not at par with his seeing counterparts. You have to tell me what I am supposed to do so that he also participates in the same way as the seeing children do.
Okay.
And what a regular school teacher is unable to do, I'll give you an example. For example, maths class, geometry teaching, a student of class 8 where Pythagoras theorem comes, blind child will never understand anything from regular school teachers teaching Pythagoras theorem. He will have to obtain support of a special educator. Special educator is competent, equipped with skills, techniques which are needed to teach Pythagoras theorem to a blind child. Therefore, the role of a special educator is definitely larger than that of a regular school teacher. Where a special educator is not available in the school, there the child included in this school is a physical inclusion, not real inclusion. I for one strongly believe that inclusion should be in learning, not only in terms of physical
In
inclusion.
physical presence.
Actually,
Dr. Soni?
I have slight different opinions. We cannot generalize things. Depends on individuals, also depends on environment. It's not necessary that if there is no special teacher, then there would be no academic or social inclusion. It's not necessary at all.
No,
Depends on
no,
what
Dr.
kind-
Soni,
yeah.
I fully agree that not necessary. But imagine where there is a totally blind child in a school. He has definitely, you can say this true in the case of low vision children, but where the disability, sensorial disability is profound, their support of a regular special educator is a must to make his inclusive learning effective. Reality.
It is true that if
Yeah.
the special teacher is given, it supports the disabled child. But we cannot make it a condition that if this, then that. It's not that. It should be. It is desirable. It helps the child in integration, in learning also. And as far as social integration is concerned, I can tell you that even in the schools where special teachers have been provided, there is no social integration.
No, that
Because
is
it's not
that
the
is the
teacher who
defect.
will ensure. It's the environment which ensures whether all children are integrated or not. As far as what I was talking about, this planning about the groups, I said it will generate a kind of sensitivity. A special teacher can give individual consultancy. A special teacher can tell the general teacher, okay, if you have this problem, you can do this and you can adapt your teaching like this, and the child will understand. Or I will help the child to understand a particular topic. That is okay. But here the consultancy is going to an individual only. But when you make it a kind of a group effort where all groups say what they feel or all groups tell what are their problems, that communication goes to everybody. And that generates a kind of sensitivity. So in planning and management, when there is a sensitivity also, apart from the technical things, then probably the people who know nothing about these children would come to know about it.
Yeah, I agree with you here, Dr. Soni, but the role of the special teacher would perhaps be specific to that process of empowerment, of sensitization, they have a major role to play here, because they understand and they are trained and they understand the needs, and they have they are equipped with strategies to sort of adapt curriculum and to adapt teaching methods. So they do have a very critical sort of a role to play in that process of sensitization that you were talking about, don't you think?
Yeah, that is true. I agree with that. But what I am saying is that if this group of parents and also special
Community,
teachers and
yeah.
teachers and community,
Ji.
when they sit together and when they plan for something, each group will be saying something and the other group may be responding to that. So that will create a kind of
That is certainly
sensitivity.
a participatory sort
Yeah.
of
But see, he is not
method
a
of-
consultant to a particular teacher. When he gives consultation to all teachers, maths teacher for one class is not only for one class, he teaches to many classes. Similarly, a science teacher, not one class, to many classes. So he is a consultant not only to the maths teacher, he is consultant to all the teachers for that matter. That is group of teachers, isn't it?
But only the teacher who is teaching the in which class the visually impaired is included. But when you sit in the general planning, even if you are not concerned with that, when you listen to his
That is what is called
yeah.
sensitization.
Yeah.
Ji.
That is what is sensitization,
Yeah.
ma'am has
Yeah,
rightly
and I
said.
think that is the
That is
most
also a
important
ve-
role
that is an
perhaps
important
of
role.
A special educator in planning of education settings, in the education setting,
Yeah.
really. No? We can go on.
Yeah, let's move to the next slide. Now this is broad classification of special education as has been shown in the model. Broadly we have classified special education into two parts only. Of course there could be various types of settings, but we have broadly classified it into two in the model, and that was special school approach and inclusive education setting. Now here special education can broadly be discussed into two categories. It's the same thing what I said earlier. One is special setting and the second is inclusive education setting. As I stated earlier, the need of the child is first. The general practice is that we decide what kind of setting the child should go. That's absolutely wrong from the education point of view. It's the child whose needs have to be taken care of. What kind of needs the child has? Can he study in inclusive setting? Is he average child? Or if the child is very weak in different areas of learning, then would the child need special support in integrated education or inclusive education setting? Or will the child need a special school setting where special care is given to the educational needs of the child? So these things will be discussed in the separate slide. So from here we move on to the next slide.
I would like to point out one thing here. In our syllabi, a term is used, selective placement. What Dr. Soni is telling is the same thing, selective placement, because our audience, there may be some students who might be referring to the syllabus and might be reading selective placement, then would be getting confused what is selective placement.
Right.
It is exactly the same thing. The placement of a child as per his needs, as per the wishes of his parents. The child's needs, not only the child's needs, child's parents are also should also be taken into consideration while recommending a particular setting for that particular child.
Okay.
So in the next slide we have planning and management, and here we discuss special school setting. The planning and management of special school setting need separate building. I mean, this is broadly I have defined separate building with suitable modifications, special trained staff special teaching learning materials, special equipment, and care of visually impaired children. Why I have said all these things? Because in special schools, we are supposed to have special teacher who has received special training to deal with these children. We are also supposed to have the staff who has basic knowledge of visually handicapped children, what are their problems, how they should teach those children daily living skills, and so on. So many things are there. These things cannot be expected from our regular school, because the most of the staff over there is the staff which deals with children who don't have visual problems. So special school setting has to be a different setting where the staff has basic, it is at least expected, though it is not true, to be very frank. Most of the staffs don't have any knowledge whatsoever about visually impaired. They just learn. It's the principle of learning by doing. They do it and they learn it. But this is the part of special school setting that they are expected to have all this knowledge. Anything, Dr. Mittal, would you like to add?
No, that's okay. Special schools fine.
Yeah.
See, basically special schools were set up to meet the needs of blind children. And ideally speaking, special schools are the ideal places for blind children. Although many people argue that the children studying in special schools, their psychosocial development is not as per the desired norms, this and that. But if you provide all necessary support, proper learning environment, proper social interaction, so on and so forth, then they are the ideal settings for the education of children with visual impairment. I know several people who are known in this field, and they say that they are staunch supporters of integration or inclusion, yet when they are asked what is their personal opinion outside a public place, then they say that after retirement they would like to set up special school, which means that special schools have their value, have their importance, have their contribution in the educational development of our blind children, because regular schools will not be able to provide all that can be provided by a special school. The concept of integration inclusion came only on the ground that special school is an expensive approach, this and that.
Well, we will discuss this point in the coming slides.
I don't know.
But, ideally, Dr. Mittal is 100% right. Ideally. Practically, there are problems. Dr. Mittal also knows and knows the drawbacks of the special schools and what is necessary in the present condition when we are going towards globalization. Our special schools, are they able to prepare these children for future problems? I mean, this is questionable. If they can, even then, why should we separate these children? This is the question. I mean, of course, I am not denying the advantages. There is a slide where we will talk about the advantage. I am not denying the advantages of special schools. But in the larger context, are these schools able to provide what these children would need in future? This is a big question, which we will discuss.
Now to that, Dr. Soni, my question is, are there no separate schools for seeing children? Are they not living away from their parents? By special school means where children are living away from their parents in one premises.
But also there is this issue of children learning from each other and children with differences and recognizing the diversity and the individual differences of each other. That sensitization, if it starts early, it always contributes towards development of personality.
It does. There is no denying
Ji.
to this fact. But if the other things which are more important for learning are missing, then this leads to a rather half improper development of the child than the proper development of child, educational development of child, to my mind.
Dr.
Okay.
Mittal, you may be aware that when we were studying because I myself started my education from a special school. So I'm
Yes,
not
it would be
subject.
interesting for you
Yeah.
to comment because
Yeah.
you've been on both
We
sides.
both, we
Yeah.
both are from that same.
And
Right,
I had this inclusive education opportunity
Subsequently.
also.
Yes.
From 10th onwards.
No problem. I mean, there is no doubt that problems are there. If you move from a special school setting to inclusive setting, you encounter so many problems. There is no doubt about that. But the awareness that you create among the teachers, the awareness that you create among your peers is of great importance. For instance, when I left school, and if my classmates met me on the street, maybe after 5 or 10 years, and the way they were communicating and they were inquiring, they know what can I do, what I am doing, what they can do, what they are doing. This kind of interaction created an awareness, and from one person to another and so on, it goes to the larger community. That awareness contributes towards the employment of the visually handicapped or other disabled, for which we are having education. The purpose of education is just not learning, but also to prepare ourselves to face the challenges of life. And that challenges could be faced better if we get cooperation from others. And the cooperation can be better expected when the other people have opportunity to know about you. So here is the role of inclusive education.
True. Would you like to go on to your...
Is there any question?
No, not
From the
yet.
audience? Not yet?
Not
Okay.
yet.
Now I go to the next slide.
I'd just like to interrupt for a minute and reiterate and remind the audience who may be watching this program that they could phone in and ask questions. We are having a very interesting debate over here, and various dimensions of this whole issue of inclusive and special education and so on. We're discussing all this. Is very lively and interesting. Please call in. Our telephone numbers of the studio are scrolling on your TV screen. I'd like to just call them out also. You can call at 011-265-11613, 011-265-11618. You can even fax us your questions at 011-265-11609. So do call and engage with us and share your own views on the topics that we are discussing. Before we go on, there's just one question. I mean, I have the curriculum, of and the blocks units relating to this paper in front of me, and we have one aspect of here in Unit 1, which says inclusion, integration, principles of normalization. Would you like to sort of elaborate on this a little bit when we
Okay.
say this whole concept of normalization, as we say?
Right.
I presume it's linked to what
Yeah,
we are
it is
talking
linked.
about
Yeah, it
just
is linked.
now.
Actually, you know now about the special school setting.
Ji.
From a special school setting, I mean, there was a problem in basically what I have read. In Denmark, there was a problem. Mentally handicapped children were put in asylums. Institutions.
Ji.
There they were mistreated. There was a lot of abuse. And as a result of that, parents said that even though my child is mentally handicapped, he must be treated like a normal child.
Ji.
And they said that we need our child, we need institution close to our home. That means our child should go to normal institution and normal school, and it is the duty of the government to provide facility, because we are taxpayer. We are paying the tax, we are paying indirectly, we are financing the education of our child. Therefore, the facilities must be extended in the nearest school. So from there, they use the term normalizing the education of their mentally handicapped child. The child must get normal environment, and that was called normalization.
Okay.
Now, integration was the term used in England and other European countries. They said that the child must be integrated in the regular school. He should become a part of regular school system, and he should become a regular part of the society. He is a part of the society, therefore he should be integrated. I mean, these are the short things which I am telling you. Then Americans used a different term. When the normalization movement was going on in Denmark, Sweden, one American educationist, his name was Wolfgang C. Berger, he visited Sweden and Denmark, and he was very much influenced from their philosophy. So when he went back, he advocated this philosophy, and he said the children must be mainstreamed in regular schools. Of course, the laws in America that time were framed, making it mandatory for all schools to provide facilities or to children with disability. And one of the laws is 92 146
42,
142
94 142.
94 142.
Yes.
So that law specifically provides for the specific facilities must be made available in the regular school. So this is how this is normalization, integration, and mainstreaming. And from there we moved on to inclusion, where it is said that earlier it was a medical model. Medical model means we were seeing the problems of the child, and we were saying that the child should be equipped to do this, equipped to do that. That means the responsibility was of the
On the child.
disabled child,
Yes.
or their
Or the
parents.
families. Okay.
But inclusion said no. It's not only the responsibility of the child or their the parents. Actually, it's the responsibility of the system. It's the system which has to cater for
adapt and
educational
change,
needs of the
yes.
child. We have to adopt ourselves. The system has to adopt ourselves to meet educational needs of the child. Child is a part of this system. Inclusion means it is a part. I mean, it is not something different which you are trying to put in. It's a part. So the part has to be of the whole, and that's how the philosophy of inclusion came in.
Professor Mehta?
Basically, the purpose of using these terms is one, and that is the child must get an environment which is most suitable, which is most appropriate for his learning. And to that is called normalization in Scandinavian countries, integration in other European countries, mainstreaming in Australia and other countries. Americans are of late using a term LRE, least restrictive environment.
Yes.
Okay, so the 5 terms basically are normalization, integration, mainstreaming, LRE, and recently inclusion. They are all having the same philosophy, same purpose, and which is that the child must get an environment suited to his needs for learning, so that he can learn what he is supposed or what he can or what he should learn.
Okay.
Well, the major shift which I see in inclusion and other terminologies is that here you have to accept as a part, whereas earlier the child was supposed to be fitted in. Here the responsibility is more of institutions. That is big difference. Of course, this is philosophical.
Definitely. It is philosophical, not practical.
Not practical, because practically we still have lot of problems. Philosophically, they are one step ahead.
But you'll agree that the philosophy, if the philosophy is right, we can slowly
Move to
evolve and
Definitely,
change and
definitely.
move
No, that is
towards
true, that
that.
is true, that is
Yeah.
true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, can we go on?
Now, in
Yes.
this slide, which is already there, is a planning and management of inclusive education. Now, inclusive education setting is less expensive. I mean, this is proved fact. It's not something which I am saying. Less expensive, socially and academically more beneficial to visually impaired children. The planning of inclusive education should become an integral part of educational planning. Not that until and unless there is a special educator, you will not plan for inclusive education. No. The moment you said inclusive education, the inclusive education is part of education. You have to plan it. I mean, if people don't know, it's okay. Whatever you do, others will accept. But logically speaking, when there is inclusive education, that means that this education of children with disability is a part of education. Why should they not plan for future clientele? They have to plan it. It's part of the educational system. Now, if you go to any school where Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan is trying to bring in children with disabilities, they have very simple answer. Look, we don't know anything. It's not our responsibility. I mean, this child should be taken to special school. Why? Because we special educators, we teachers of children with disabilities must have positive attitude that it is not only our responsibility, it is the responsibility of the society as a whole. Therefore, I strongly feel that even though one may believe that special schools are the best places where we can provide them appropriate learning, I would say don't take the entire burden on your shoulders. Just go and tell the school, look, education has the responsibility. We are here to help. We are here to assist you wherever you need our help. But don't take the entire responsibility, because even if you wish, you cannot do that. You cannot cater for educational needs of crores of disabled children. We cannot open special school in every village. Ultimately, we have to go to inclusive education system, and you will get greater recognition by society. When you provide your services to schools in enabling the teachers to deal with these children, you get recognition, you get social recognition, you get importance in the school itself. So don't think that your importance is only when you are teaching in special schools. No, I would say if you are coming to the larger society, you get much better recognition. So inclusive education is less expensive. Why less expensive? Because here you are not going to construct a separate building. Here you are not going to appoint 50 or 60 staff for disabled children. Here you are not going to buy 100 Braille textbooks. Here you are not going to buy 100 Braille slates, not going to buy 10 Braillers. You will need only, maybe if there are 5 children, you need 5 items, or maybe 6 or 7 items. So it's less expensive. Then if you open a special school, you will have to have a minimum number of teachers, 5, 10, whatever. I mean, depends on whether it is primary school or middle school or secondary schools. Accordingly, you will have to have staff. Here, in inclusive setting, you are providing 1 or 2 or 3 teachers, and they will be assisting others. So it's less expensive. You don't have to have infrastructure, totally new infrastructure. Many of the things can be modified over there. For instance, if the building is not accessible, or if it is not safe for visually impaired children, you can make slight modifications. So inclusive setting is less expensive. Now, more, as I said, it's academically more beneficial. Why? Because here the child is interacting with other children. He is not only learning content in the classroom, but he is learning other social skills also. Indirectly, there is no planned activity, but they are learning. So, academically and socially, he is benefiting in both ways. Children who are studying with the handicapped child, they know what this child can do and what this child cannot do. This helps a great extent when the child grows up and when he or she goes for a job. There was a research in United States, and the research pointed out that the classmates of visually handicapped person or the professors who taught him or the visually impaired professors' students were more positive in providing the job than those who had no experience,
No exposure to such children.
who had no exposure.
Ji.
Therefore, that's why I said it's less expensive. That's the proven point. I don't have to say anything. More academically and socially more beneficial. And beneficial to whom? Beneficial to the visually impaired. I agree that there are so many problems when you go to inclusive setting. There are problems. I wouldn't deny it because I myself faced. But despite all those things, if you are going to work in an environment where everything is not for you, you are prepared there in the inclusive setting to face such problems. Now I am working. Do you think I am getting everything what I want? It is just not possible. I have to adapt myself to the environment. That's why we are talking about adaptations, which will be coming in the next slides. We are talking of adaptation of curriculum. If we are talking about adaptation of curriculum, why not talk of adaptation in the environment? Adaptation in the educational environment. So this is how I feel that inclusive, as I said earlier also, it doesn't mean that each and every child can go to inclusive education setting. Any comment, Dr. Mukta?
Well, Soni Saab, I don't agree at all with the less expensive phenomenon of inclusive education or less expensive phenomenon of integrated education. I don't have any results of any study with me right now, but certainly I would appeal NCERT or other agencies to conduct a practical or specific research. How much money is spent on integrated education, inclusive education the last 20 years and its outcome as compared to the amount of money spent on special schools and the outcome. Then only you will know whether it is expensive, less or more expensive. Less expensive, you are saying, because if in a school one child is there, you are providing one brailler. After a brailler you are providing to one child, cost is the same. If you are providing 20 braillers, children are 20, the per capita cost comes out to be the same. Then how does it, and in special school, you are providing food, accommodation, etc. In inclusive education, so you are not providing, but the family is providing. In special schools, you are not charging from the family. That doesn't mean that the money is not being spent. In integrated education, that money is not there. It is just being spent there also. So, and if the less expensive phenomenon in inclusive education integration, public schools are there. For better facilities, public schools are there, isn't it, ma'am?
Yes.
Isn't? Are they not, we are closing them. We are stopping public schools because they are more expensive. Definitely, they are more expensive than our MCD schools.
Yes,
The expenses of MCD school are much less than that of a public school. But public schools are not being closed, or their value is not being denied, rejected. Therefore, I disagree totally on the phenomenon of less expensive of inclusive education.
Well,
Academic, social, yes, no doubt about that. I fully agree. Academically, again, I will not agree, because if the child does not have inclusive learning, if the child does not have those facilities, support that he needs for his learning to which are essential because of his sensorial limitation, then academically he cannot be at par with his seeing counterparts.
Well, economically it is less expensive. I'm not talking about the parents, it's the taxpayers' money which government spends.
I think we talk, in terms of the administration, point
administration.
of view from
Yeah.
administration
Yeah.
in the outlay for education of children with disabilities.
Right.
It perhaps they probably think that it is less expensive to provide for, say, sensitization and training and inputs of resources
Everything,
in
right.
mainstream school settings rather than set up additional infrastructure and additional special schools in various places.
Madam,
to
the
cater
amount
to-
of money being spent on sensitization in the name of sensitization, etc., is much more than what is being spent in special schools.
Look,
Okay,
if you are
that
That
constructing a
comparison needs to be
building,
worked. That's what I'm saying. Research needs to be.
Yes, I think that is
conducted.
probably.
no, but if
the
you
call.
construct a building, okay, if you have separate staff,
Yeah.
okay, the salary
If-
of separate staff, the pension and everything, if you take it together,
Yeah, I
it
think
definitely comes
what
more.
we need to do is go. I'm afraid we'll have to go in for a short
Right.
break just now
Sure.
for technical
Sure.
reasons, and we'll continue this discussion
Yeah.
when we come back. Please continue to watch, and we'll be back with you in a few moments.